We are absolutely over the moon today to welcome Jess Tappin and Dan Putnam to the Badu Sports Studio to our Good Planets podcast. If you don't know them, Dan and Jess are international athletes. They also own their own business, helping people achieve both their physical and their mental goals. Dan, Jess, thank you for making the journey in from Essex to come and see us today. This is
Thanks for having us.
Very cool to have you. I want to kick off with some questions about your favourite moments of your career so far. So can you tell us some of those, please?
I'd say the one that stands out to me the most is when I went to the Commonwealth Games. I had such a roller coaster of a journey to get there. Things were going really well, and then basically I was cycling from training to work and I got knocked off my bike and I flew straight over the top of my handlebars, landed straight on my knee, shifted my shin back, done the ligaments in the back of my knee, and my knee was just hanging completely lax and needed a lot of work. So after about, I want to say 3 months of horrendous rehab, I managed to get myself back, and we went out to America for a month on a training camp. And towards the back end of the training camp, I'm meant to be racing out there, hopefully qualify, get standard for the Commonwealths. First session out there, I was so excited. I was like, right, first running session, I can't wait. Again, it had been months since I'd run, and all I'd been doing was just like so much rehab for my leg, loads of bike work, blah, blah, blah. So I was doing heptathlon at the time, and shot put was my first event I was training for. So through the shot put, stepped out the front of the circle as a practice throw, and rolled my ankle off this ledge so bad that my ankle, it bruised all the way, like halfway up my calf. And like I had to go see sports doctors. They thought my ankle was broken. I just thought, what the hell is going on? Like it was just like one thing after another, and it wasn't just little things, it was such major issues. Anyway, that wrote off the competition and the whole entire training camp. I was back to doing loads of different rehab, blah, blah, blah. Eventually, I managed to get a race out in Spain in the last weekend of attempting to qualify for Commonwealth Games. And the blocks wouldn't even stick into the track. And I was just thinking, what are my chances? So my coach, luckily, was there. She had to stand on my blocks because as I was pushing out, they were flying back off the track. And I had a panic attack before the first event. And I was just thinking, oh my gosh, what is going on with me? Managed to qualify for the Commonwealth Games. And the moment you get there, like, you've been training your whole life and you've been working so hard and you're finally there. Like, when I've got the call, I actually hung up to England Athletics because I was like, well, that's obviously a joke. Like, no. And then they called me again. They're like, no, Jess, we actually need to know if you want to take the spot or not. Burst into tears, like completely overwhelmed. But as I stepped out onto the track for the first time for my first event, I just burst into tears again. I couldn't believe like all this hard work, all these ups and downs, and I'd done it. I'd achieved like, I could just go have fun, enjoy myself. There was no pressure. Obviously I wanted to do the best as I can, and as I did, but that was for sure my highlight, and still to this day, from working so blooming hard with all the ups and downs, that was like the standout, the pinnacle, yeah, for me, for sure.
What a story.
Yeah, wow.
Strong opener.
Yeah,
I mean, that must have been so much. Yeah, I can see that. Like all of that you went through, just like to get to that final point, you didn't give up, and like the blocks not working, like silly things like that just shouldn't be happening on a track.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know, and I'm so incredibly proud of myself for sticking with it, because it's such an easy, I mean, just the first one, getting knocked off your bike and whatnot, getting through that, it was just, it took a lot of mental strength to pick myself back up. But yeah, I was very proud of myself to get through all of that, for sure.
Even sweeter because it was so hard.
Yeah, absolutely. It was not plain sailing.
No. Yeah.
By any stretch.
The journey, because of that tough journey to get to the Commonwealth Games, that was the actual experience of being there was different because of the journey, and even sweeter.
Yeah, for sure. It means even more. If anything in life is easy, I don't think you appreciate it as much. Yeah, not that you want to have those bits, but I think you just learn to appreciate things a lot more.
And what about you? What was your favourite moment from your career so far?
I'd say mine was actually a lot more recent. So I've been doing the sport for about 20 years now, since 2005. I think was my first official season as like a young 13-year-old, and now I'm knocking towards the mid-30s, and it's still going, still trying to go strong. But I was quite a successful junior and sort of won a lot of national titles all the way up through like under 15, under 17, under 20. And I went to the World Junior Championships, and we actually won a bronze medal at the World Juniors, which in the past, when I've been asked this question, I often draw on like a global medal as my best moment. But I guess now that I'm a little bit older, I actually look at the fact that 2 years ago I had a massive breakthrough in terms of the times that I was running over the 400 metres. So I've always been a 400 metre runner pretty much my whole career. And I basically got stuck on the 47-second mark. 47 seconds is good, it's a good level, but it's not that top level. Like if you're running 47s, you're winning quite a few races, but you're also losing quite a few as well. Whereas if you go quicker, if you go into the 46s, you're suddenly at the front of races, and then obviously beyond that, you're like absolutely like top world class. Mm-hmm. And for 10 years, like my whole 20s, I was stuck in this 47-second bracket, and I think it became a lot more of a mental barrier than it did a physical one. Like I was with some good coaches, and the form and the shape that I would show in training would suggest that I was able to run a lot quicker. But then I'd step on the start line, and just something would just always go wrong. And we're talking like hundreds of races over this 10-year period that I wasn't able to break this barrier. And then a couple of years ago, started coaching myself, sort of switched my mindset into how I was going to go about this challenge. And when I finally ran the first 46-second run, I think that is now sort of my favourite moment in the sport. One, just because the sense of relief I got when I crossed the line. Just so many years and so many races I'd waited to cross the line and see that on the clock, and it had never happened for whatever reason. And then since that day, so that was less than 2 years ago, I ran 46 for the first time, and I've now run over 20 times in the 46-second bracket. So it just shows, like, physically, maybe I'm not in the best shape of my life right now, but mentally I'm so much stronger that my results are just a hell of a lot better anyway. So I would say that it's a little bit different to Jess, but yeah, that would be my favourite.
So I just want to dig in a little bit more on this. So this kind of like real, intuitive kind of listening to your body, and that kind of more compassionate sort of training within this. From a coaching perspective, are you quite like a bit of an outlier here, and doing something that's different to sort of? I mean, you both said that like you didn't experience this yourself when you had other coaches.
I mean, we've had a lot of clients who come to us and they're really motivated, and they're like, I want to do this, I want to achieve this. And 2 weeks in, the motivation's still high, and they're like, this is great. 4 weeks in, suddenly they stop returning our calls. They're not messaging as much. They're saying like, oh, I didn't manage to do this today. I didn't get around to doing my gym session or my track session, whatever it might be. The excuses start creeping in, the motivation dips, and that's where the mindset is key.
Yeah.
So physically, they've got these big goals that they want to achieve, but if your mindset isn't right towards those goals, you're never going to get there. So that's what we try and fix people's mindsets before we then fix what physically they want fixing, you know?
Yeah.
What does that look like in practicalities with the kind of people you're coaching?
I think with a lot of people comes, to start with, is one negativity and a lot of excuses. Like, unbelievable amounts. And you're just like, okay, well, why are you thinking like that? Or why are you doing that?
Yeah.
And making them recognise how they're speaking and what they're saying, and switching their mind without being like, you need to do this, you need to do that. Just question them and then make them think about it, and then that helps switch something. You're not sitting down with them, just easy in conversation.
Yeah, and you sort of got to try and drip feed it in, because if you just try and throw this mindset onto someone who hasn't really had experience with it before, it can be overwhelming, and it can seem just like too much for them to absorb in one go. We often talk about like the glass half full and the glass half empty approach. Like if I was to step onto the start line of a race and I was thinking, this is going to be the best race of my life, I'm in unbelievable shape, I'm literally going to run my fastest time, I'm going to win this race. Alternatively, I could step on the line and say, I really don't feel good. This is going to be a bad day. I can't see this going well at all. Physically, I'm in exactly the same shape, but I've walked onto the start line with two completely different mindsets, which is going to decide the outcome of the race. So the fact that I might be in 45-second shape to run a 400 meters is irrelevant, because if I'm telling myself it's not going to go well, it's not going to go well. I'm not going to suddenly surprise myself and just run 45 seconds. If I think it's going to go bad, it's going to go bad, because your mind makes your body do these kind of things, right?
Is it a practice? Is it something that you learn to have that mindset?
Definitely. A lot of, like, it does take repetition, doesn't it? And it also, you have to take it into your whole life, I think. You sort of got to let it consume you a little bit.
Yeah.
So we don't just take it into sport, we take it into our coaching, we take it into anything you do in life.
Walks of life,
you put a positive spin on things. And don't get me wrong, we're not just walking around like the two most positive people in the world by any stretch. Like, everyone has moments, days, sometimes weeks where you get into a bit of a rut, into a bit of a hole, and you do tend to just look at things that little bit negatively, essentially. But then that's where we're really helpful to each other.
Yeah.
Because if one of us is feeling like that, the other one's like,
right,
come on.
Have your moment.
Yeah.
Now snap out of it.
That's it. That's it. And sometimes you need to be told, like, it needs to be sort of like a harsh sort of truth, doesn't it? It's like, look, I know you're feeling like this, sort of wallow in it for the next hour or so, but then snap out of it, because we've got work to do, essentially.
Yeah.
The other day I was listening to, it's from a few years ago now, but a podcast with Johnny Wilkinson. And he was sort of talking about this, and I love you. We haven't really sort of talked about the start of your career and how you got into this, but he was talking about the joy early on of sort of playing, and then as he got, the pressure became too much, and it was the whole, there was a lot of things going down, and that joy was lost, and it became very rigid, and there wasn't the fluidity and the flow there and things, and he sort of was talking more to that, and he was talking, he picked out like some of the best sports people in different industries, and how there's this flow to it as well, and it feels like they're still in love with their sport as well.
Yeah, 100%. Like, we're massive believers in enjoyment being the key to longevity in a sport.
Yeah.
Like Jess alluded to before, like we was both in our 20s, and we'd both sort of either plateaued or regressed for a number of years. And under normal circumstances, you probably see people throw in the towel at that stage and just call it a day and be like, look, we've had a good run, we've achieved some stuff, but ultimately maybe it's just not ever going to get any better.
Yeah.
But then when we started working together, like coaching
I think
together as well.
The thing is, with me, and I know the same for you, like, looking back in the future, so like when you look back, I don't ever want to have any regrets, and I don't want to ever be like, oh, but what if I could have done this? How many people do you speak to, or do we speak to, and they're, oh yeah, I used to do athletics, I used to run, I'd run this, I'd done that, oh, but then I got into the pub, or oh, I got injured, or whatever the excuse is, they could have done this, they could have done that.
Yep.
I never ever wanted that. I wanted to be like, I done this, and I got the absolute most out of myself. And I think that's why I've also tried to stay in the sport as long as I can, and still thriving.
Well, that's it. Neither of us felt ready to retire, essentially, because we didn't feel like we'd hit our peak.
Got everything out.
Yeah, we didn't feel like obviously we want to go to the Olympics and you want to go to World Championships and beyond. But essentially, it's the trying to go for those competitions which is a success in itself. So you're not always, to go to the Olympics is incredibly hard, right? Because there's so many people trying to do it, and it's the best of the best, like the 0.001% of people in a particular sport. But the fact that we're fully invested on this journey that is a success story. And whether we make it to the Olympics or not, we can look back on like this year in our lives and we can be like, you know what, we gave it our best shot. And regardless of whether that ends with, and we went to the Olympics, it does matter, but equally it doesn't. In the long run, when you're going to look back if you're 60 or 70 and you're telling people about it, is that journey which is ultimately the success.
So, start line, biggest race of your career. How's it feel? What is that like?
I think, I don't know if we'll be different in this, but I think it's the sense of relief that you've, again, like everything that you've been trying and the dedication and the sacrifices of everything to get to that moment, all those horrendous training sessions that you've done in the rain, in the cold, whatever, like throwing up on the side of the track, in between reps, knowing that you've got more to go, like, it was all worth it, like, and you've managed to achieve that massive goal. Like, I think it would, be an emotional one for me, but as soon as you hear that gun, that's it. You're ready.
Yeah.
But before that, I feel like, it would be an amazing, amazing moment. Just even hearing the crowd, like that's, being in a stadium, like a full stadium is, for me, like one of the best things.
Yeah. I think for me, I would sort of attack the question from a slightly different perspective. So to put it into like a sort of real world situation, we've got our Olympic trials in 3.5 weeks' time. And so obviously, essentially, we're going to be fulfilling this question. We're going to be stepping out onto the track on what potentially is our biggest race of our life. And in that moment, the old me would have let the emotion of it overwhelm. So this, in my head, I would have been thinking, this is so important. This means everything to me. Everyone's watching me. What happens if it goes wrong? Is this going to be a complete failure? You know, and all of these thoughts are crossing your mind. And what it would do in the past is it would distract me from the task at hand, which is actually making sure that I run the best race of my life. So I'd be so caught up with these external factors that I wouldn't be focusing on the one thing that I need to focus on. So in 3.5 weeks' time, I'm going to be standing on the start line. And for me, it's going to be like every other race that I've done in the past 2 years. So I see it as work. Now, essentially, I try my best to detach my emotion from the race itself and just focus on executing everything that I need to execute. Because essentially, yes, there's going to be people that I need to beat. There's going to be times that I need to run. If I get a medal, then obviously that's going to put me in really good stead for the Olympic team as well. But all of those things will be achieved if I just do the best that I can do.
Yeah.
So just simplify it all. And if I give my very best performance on that day, then everything else sort of falls into line. Whereas if you start thinking, I've got this person in my race, he's really good or she's really good, then suddenly you're not focusing on yourself, you're almost focusing on them.
From the bigger perspective, you'll know before races of, like, you know, on paper who are the fastest people and who you're up against, and do you kind of want them to perform at their best, so it raises you and you see a bit more of your potential, or are you a bit like, I hope they have an off day, you know, kind of thing, or you're just not, you're not even thinking about this, you don't, and we don't have to air this if it's too personal.
No, it's a good question.
I think it's a brilliant question.
It's a really relevant question, yeah.
Go on, do you want to answer it?
No, go on, you take it.
I think, going back to like what Dan was saying about when he's on the start line, it's very much, if he executes his race well, then he'll get the times that he deserves and for the shape that he's in. And so I think if someone else steps up and runs faster that day, I think we think the same, like, fair play to them. I've done the best I can do on that day, and if that person has run that little bit faster, then you can't dwell on it, because that's all you could have done. Like, you've given it everything. However, you want to stay in your own zone. I feel like when I'm on the start line, I just focus on I say my lane, my hurdles. Like, I have blinkers. And the moment those blinkers come off, I run bad. If I look at somebody else, it's game over. You just need to focus, have those blinkers.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do your research before. Like, there's nothing wrong with going into a race prepared. So, like, you know who's likely to be in your field, in your race, and you sort of know what their strengths and weaknesses are. But essentially, like you said, like, you know on paper potentially who the best people in the race are, who the fastest people. But it's a cliche that it's never run on paper.
Yeah.
And like the only time it really matters is when you're all on the same track at the same time in the same conditions. Because people will go and run fast times out in America, or they might go to somewhere like super fast somewhere in Europe, and they'll drop a ridiculous time.
Yeah.
And then like we might go and run in Essex in a really windy day, and our time be slower. So like on paper, obviously we're going to be further down. But if you were to swap those conditions, would we then be ahead? Who knows? You never really know for sure. So therefore, when you're in the Olympic trials in a few weeks' time, when we're all in Manchester at the same time and we're all lining up together, everything that's happened before that is irrelevant, because it's then all about people performing. And there's going to be people who run a second slower than their best time this season. There's going to be people that go half a second quicker than their best time this season. So be prepared for anything from other people, but as long as you bring your best, there can be no regrets. Because that's it. Like I've always said to Jess, make people beat you, don't lose to other people. So if Jess steps out on the start line and she runs half a second down on her best and she loses by a couple of attempts as a result, that person hasn't beaten her because she hasn't beaten the best version of Jess. Jess has lowered her game and this person has crept in as a result, So whereas if my best is here and then on the day I perform here and someone still finishes ahead of me, then fair play to them. Like they've obviously nailed it that day, but so have I. So there can be absolutely no regrets in what I've done on that given day.
You're the queen of awesome quotes on social media, and I've been the benefit of many of them. I think even like during the pandemic and stuff like that, you're still pumping out the positivity. So eternal gratitude for that. Like, what are some of the little key quotes that that are really important to you or living by at the moment?
I think one that you just said, control the controllables. I think that is so key. And I think if you get het up about those tiny little things, you just end up in this massive hole and you can never get out of it. So if you can try and, like I say, control those controllables, life becomes a lot easier because you're just not stressing so much about these things. Another one, what's another one that I like?
The 100% one?
Yeah. So you may not always feel 100%, but you can always give 100%. That's one that you actually said to me, and I love that. In terms of training, you may feel horrendous one day, but as long as you still turn up and you give 100%, that's all you can ask for, and you're still going to get so much out of it, and you can turn it into in the office or whatever it may be. But as long as you still turn up and you give 100%, that's all you can ask for. I just think those two are my favourites that get you through each day.
Guys, we'd love to talk about your coaching ethos and specifically what you as elite athletes can offer that other sort of coaches can't.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And obviously, in a world where there's loads of coaches, you're kind of looking for that niche that sets you apart from other people. So in terms of, obviously, we've sort of walked the walk. So we've made it to a top level in athletics. So I guess if people are looking for someone who has done that, then that's fantastic. But equally, not everyone looks for those kind of people. One of the difficulties we've actually found in our coaching is that people don't think they're the right clients for us because we do elite sport, but we don't necessarily just coach elite sport, but people don't realise that. So your person on the street who wants to lose weight for their summer holiday. We'd love to help people do that, but they'll be thinking, oh, well, these guys, like they're like elite athletes. They're not going to want to help someone like me. But it's quite the opposite. It's like we want people who are driven.
Yeah, that's massive.
And that's it. We want people who are motivated and actually have a goal that they actually want to achieve. Yeah. Not a spur of the moment, like, oh, I want to do this, and then, like we discussed earlier, 2 weeks later, they're no longer talking to you, or the motivation's dropped, and they're suddenly no longer wanting that goal.
Yeah.
We want people who are like, look, this is something that I wanted to do for years.
This is my goal.
And maybe I haven't found the right avenue before. Can you guys help me? And in that case, it's absolutely. And whatever their goal might be, we're on that journey and we're fully invested.
Yeah.
As much as we'd invest into our own athletics, we invest into that person. Because for us, we never want to do someone a disservice. And like the fact that we have pushed ourselves to such a high level almost puts the pressure on for us to do the same for other people, if that makes sense. Like we would never give a mediocre job to someone when we know that we can push someone to their max and we can sort of finely tune things so that they can achieve any goal that they want.
Dan, Jess, thank you so much. Yeah, it was amazing to have you come to the studio today. Brilliant conversations, loads and loads of gold in it, and all the very best for your Olympic trials in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Cheers.